Maulerfiends are mountains of muscle, ceramite, grasping claws, and insensate rage from the demon bound within its shell. These shock vehicles are used to assault fortified enemy positions and enemy vehicles. They're known as scalers to Imperial troops because they are able to climb just about anything given how hard they can grasp with their hands. Hello everybody, my name is Spoons Rattling, and today we are covering the Maulerfiend of the Chaos Space Marines, who comes in at a princely 130 points. He moves 10 inches, so nice and fast. He's toughness 10, so nice and resilient to anything but big anti-tank weapons. With a 3+ save and a 5+ invuln, he does have a chance to deflect anything, and in cover he's quite tough. With 12 wounds, he has a lot to chew through. He's leadership 6+ and OC 3. Very solid stats for 130 points, to be sure. In terms of ranged weapons, he can take the optional Melta Cutters, which are Melta 2, with 2 attacks that hit on 3s at strength 9, AP 4, and damage D6. With only range 6 inches, you will have to basically be in combat to use these things effectively, but such is the price you pay for being a big, angry demon dinosaur. In terms of melee weapons, he comes standard with Lasher Tendrils and Maulerfiend Fists. The Tendrils have extra attacks. They are 6 attacks, a hit on 3s at strength 7, AP 1, and damage 1. Very good for carving through things like Orcs and Guardsmen, so this guy doesn't get too slowed down. Then he also has 6 attacks with his Maulerfiend Fists. 3 attacks that hit on 3s at strength 14, AP 2, and damage D6+1 makes them very, very painful to any enemy that gets hit by them. Its ability is a simple but powerful one. It can ignore any and all modifiers to move, advance, and charge, which is definitely very handy for this guy as he wants to be getting into combat ASAP. And the unit composition is pretty simple. It's simply one Maulerfiend equipped with Lasher Tendrils, Maulerfiend Fists, and you can swap the Lasher Tendrils for 2 Magma Cutters, so 4 shots in total. Generally, I'd stick with the Lasher Tendrils because they look cooler and they do help with whipping apart small hordes of infantry. But if you want to hunt things like rhinos and then crush what's inside of them, the Melta Cutters definitely have their place on this guy if you so choose. Overall, though, for 130 points, this is just a really solid data sheet to have a huge, muscled-out, tough thing your enemy will have to remove because it will be taking chunks out of their army very, very quickly, especially in certain detachments. There's not too much in the way of buff options. Of course, the Warp Smith gives you +1 to hit, which is very nice, as is healing. It wouldn't be very hard for him to keep up, as he just needs to be within 3 inches, so he effectively only needs to get a 2 or more on his advance rolls to keep up. But I'd say it's not the best place for him, unless you have another vehicle to buff, because the Warp Smith wants to buff super valuable things, and part of the value of the Maulerfiend is just how cheap it is for how dangerous it is. The Sorcerer and Terminator armor is fantastic, as he can mark a unit for +1 AP, which makes things hiding behind a 2+ save like Land Raiders a lot less comfortable. And even against 3+ save things like Nice, it's really nice to force as much damage as possible onto them, especially with those big D6+1 damage rolls, which could really, really ruin a knight's day, that's to be sure. Aside from that, you could also get Abaddon, but I figure it would be very hard for him to keep up, and I don't think having the Maulerfiends lag behind, as cool as it is, would be worth it. In terms of detachments, Veterans of the Long Wars, of course, very good. The detachment rule is great, especially to fish for any sort of extra hits that you need with your weapons. And the Fight's First stratagem is very pricey, but could be potentially game-winning if this thing is able to pop something like a Cerastus Knight Lancer. In terms of Deceptors, I'd say he's just a solid unit to build up from all sides, as well as just having some muscle, which is usually a very traditionally infantry-focused army. Renegade Raiders can give you Assault, which is nice if you're bringing the Magma Cutters. The extra AP is also fantastic, and the potential to get Precision for a command point is simply great, actually, when it pops up. You could kill someone like Helbrecht or Azrael, which could be hugely influential. Dread Talons is a pretty bad detachment, but you could get some situational damage buffs, which would be nice. Fellhammer gives you that extra durability, which is very nice, as this guy's very fast, and it takes anti-tank weapons to get rid of this guy, so he'll be very hard to remove. Packbound Zealots, I'd say Slanesh and Nurgle are the best, because Slanesh gives you more sustained hits and advance and charge, which is really good. And Nurgle, of course, means you can't shoot him from long range, which would keep things like rail cannons from being all that effective against him, because they'd have to get in very close, in which case, if they whiff, he will easily destroy them next turn. In Chaos Cult, you can have Cultists soak fire for him, which definitely could be useful. If you just have a huge amount of Cultists to protect this guy from being shot, it would just make this guy really hard to remove, which would be cool, if probably not the most effective. Soulforged is it is his best place, and also probably one of the best units there. Getting an extra 33% attacks on your big fists is simply fantastic. Getting extra AP smashing through buildings. This guy is a frontline superstar, like first round draft pick unit for this detachment. Just to have these guys running at the enemy right away is just so useful. And I wanted to mention Creation of Bile. Even though they are not infantry, they can still act as the muscle behind that force if needed. In terms of competition, there really isn't anything that does his exact job in his price range. You could argue Possessed, but they're not going to hit quite as hard consistently as this guy. The Hellbrute costs the same, but the Brute is rather far behind in my opinion. He has worse toughness, he's slower, and if you want him to really compete, he'll need something like 2 melee weapons, which isn't necessarily bad, but you could also just bring a maulerfiend. It is a bit awkward to get a Hellbrute into combat, though admittedly, given how much smaller a Hellbrute is compared to this guy, you can relatively easily have him hiding behind things, which is a benefit if you want to use him as more of a countercharge threat. Defiler is kind of a rich man's maulerfiend, similar melee but packing a huge amount of guns, all for 60 more points. He's a very solid unit in Soulforged, but I believe the two could very easily coexist there, with the maulerfiends being more of the front guard, with the Defilers following behind, firing off with their cannons and guns, and then using their counteroffensive when they finally do get to melee. I think the two actually work quite well together despite their similarities in role in most detachments. Overall, though, I think the Maulerfiend in its price bracket is the easy king of just raw beefiness and melee damage. Of course, you can't benefit from leaders or anything like that, but still, I think if you just need some melee might, just grab a Maulerfiend, and there you go. You've got your melee might right there. Moving on to his best use, the Maulerfiend is pretty simple. Just slap a buff on them if you want to, they don't even really need it, and then just sprint at the enemy and rip them apart when you get there. In terms of loadouts, the tendrils look cooler, so I prefer them, as well as patching up one of his weaknesses, which would be against hordes. But if you want to hunt transports, like I said, the magma cutters could be very handy to pop a small transport and then rip apart whatever's inside. I'd say he's good in every detachment, as he's just very fast, he's very tough, and he's a threat the enemy has to remove, or they're going to lose a lot of their hard hitters very fast, or get tied up in melee with something they just have no chance of killing. And he's all for a very cheap price, 130 points. That's a great price for a unit like this. He excels in Soulforged Warpack, as he's just a huge threat that protects any tanks or things like Defilers. While they fire away, this guy can just continue to crush enemy units. He is really good. He just pops enemies like watermelons. What is there to say? I'd say you could easily bring 1 or 2 of these in any Chaos army, and you probably wouldn't regret it, just because even if, they just crush some things and then go off to do objectives, they're going to be really hard to kill while doing stuff like that, so any job you can give them, they can do very well. I love the Maulerfiend. I think it looks cool. I think it's a really good unit. I hope you all enjoyed this video. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.